Whew, thank God. We needed this. Desperately. What's going on, guys, and welcome back to my Beverly Hills Cop film review series on this 4th of July day. I hope everybody has a great 4th of July, popping firecrackers and partying and eating fatty foods. I know I will. We are now at the 4th chapter, the newest one that just hit Netflix, and Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. In other words, Beverly Hills Cop 4. The final chapter in the series, which that's up for debate, they may make more. And as always, as a reminder, I've already reviewed the rest of them, the first 3, which is in the link in the description down below, so check those out when you can. So in this entry, after his daughter is threatened and his friend is kidnapped, Axel Foley teams up with his daughter, her ex-boyfriend, and his pal, John Taggart, to uncover a conspiracy within the Beverly Hills Police Department. So for those of you who are finding me for the first time, and since I did not mention this in the last film's review and the third film's review, Beverly Hills Cop has never really been a franchise that I was much into. I never really grew up with it. I was introduced to it much later in life. I was more into things like Bad Boys, Rush Hour, Money Talks, Lethal Weapon, Nothing to Lose, and 48 Hours to an extent. Those kind of team-up movies. Those were my thing. Those were more my cup of tea. But after watching these after years away from them, I actually do appreciate these films for what they are. I've enjoyed them, with the exception of 3. So with that being said, starting off the positives of Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, this was a much redeemed film compared to that last one. This is the one that pretty much derailed that last one off a cliff. What I mean by that is, obviously, it was a lot better than that one. I felt like it was more focused. I felt like it was more on track from what this film series has pretty much lost. I felt like it was more on par of what a Beverly Hills Cop movie should be. That third one was just all kinds of wrong. It just felt all over the place, and it was just way off track. Like it wasn't even on the same train track. But I thought this new entry, it did it so much better. It placed it right back on that train track where it should be. And like I said, I think this redeemed the franchise to a T, pretty much, which was a big relief. Because Axel Foley actually felt like Axel freaking Foley. I mean, that last one, he just didn't feel like he wanted to be there at all. I thought he was way better in this. Yeah, he's a little bit mature. It's been exactly 30 years since that last film was released. He doesn't go as hard as he did with that character that he did in the first 2 when he was in his 20s or 30s. I assume that's how old he was back then. But it still shows here, and it still throws in punches to let you know that this is actually that damn character that we all know and love from those first 2 films. There is a little bit more magic here, and I'm just grateful that they got all those qualities back. Like I said, that third film, it was just a complete waste, and it just didn't feel like he wanted to be there at all. Stale and bland, but here it's a complete turnaround. Much more laughable, much more enjoyable. Plus the gang is back. Judge Reinhold, which he was in the last film, and even he couldn't save that one, and John Ashton. Both of them are back. I always felt that that was just the weirdest thing out of a slew of problems that that third film had. But here, you get the whole entire game back. Axel, Billy, and John. You get all 3 of them back in action, which made the nostalgia all the more precious. And, you know, I said in that first film's review that I've never really had that much nostalgia for this. This kind of overturned it, not by a long shot, not too much, but it kind of overturned that just a little bit. A little. Reinhold's character doesn't show up that much, but he still feels like he's a part of it. Plus just the fact that having John Ashton back as just one of the main leads, he's now the captain of the Beverly Hills Police Department taking over from Ronnie Cox. It felt right. It felt right again. It just made it feel more complete. I liked how they threw in the fact that Axel has a daughter. You know, of course, it's been 30 years since the last film, so a lot could happen around that time. And I think that recreated some of the edge that this film series has lost. You get a story of a group of mercenaries who pretty much basically threaten his daughter's life. She's a defense attorney, and they threaten her not to proceed with this case, which I think sets the film in motion just perfectly. Yeah, it wasn't anybody that gets shot fatally or killed or gunned down. It wasn't anything like that. They tried to change it up by just a threat, and I think that just added on to the thrill. It was more about the thrill than the violence that the first three had shown. And I thought it was very interesting. And it was a good enough reason to get the character Axel back from Detroit to Beverly Hills. And it was an interesting direction. I really did appreciate that dynamic and that focus of the story that they took. Speaking of the daughter and Axel, there's a little bit of tension there. There's a little bit of, not everything is hunky-dory in the land of fathers and daughters, which created a lot of tension that was missing, and I think they restored it perfectly here with just the whole dynamic between the two, and just not everything was just perfect. There's got to be a leeway, just something there to throw in the edge of what was happening. And it's been 30 years, and you get to find out a little bit more of a backstory to the Axel character that you don't really get in the first three. I think it just created a much more human element to the Axel character. And that was a nice little trade. I really did appreciate that. Kevin Bacon as the villain I thought was pretty good here. So far I have seen 2 movies where he plays the villain, in X-Men First Class and R.I.P.D., and this makes the 3rd one that I've seen personally. And I think he brings a really good trait to a villainous character. He has his own style, his own unique blend of what he brings to his characters of villainous roles. And in every single one of them, I noticed this. Like with every actor that brings his own style, as he should, or as he or she should, he brings this cocky attitude which kind of separates this villain from the other 3 villains in the other 3 movies. It kind of separates him from those, which I think makes him the most unique out of all the villains that we've had in this film series. Just that cocky, God complex type attitude that kind of shines, and I think Kevin Bacon pretty much perfected over the course of his career ever since he started playing villains. Now, granted, those other 2 in X-Men and R.I.P.D. was the only other films that I've seen that he played villains. There's probably more, but I think, like, what I've seen of him so far, Third's the Charm, 3rd movie of his is The Charm, I think he really brings a uniqueness to the character traits of his villainous roles. And here, again, I think he did a really excellent job. I think he was really terrific here. He was one of those villains that you kind of remember, and he's not one of those that just throws out orders and says, I'll kill you if you don't do what I say, and this and that. He actually brings a balance to it all. And again, I really do appreciate him for that. I really do appreciate what he brings to the villainous characters when he does get picked to play villainous roles. And like I said, here in Beverly Hills Cop XLF, no different, but still in a good way. I also loved how they kept the soundtrack intact for those first 3 films, to where you have this very upbeat sort of sound, and it still sort of sounds kind of like an 80s vibe. And that's kind of what you get here, not only with the Beverly Hills Cop theme, but it just gave me that kind of like 80s theme throwback, while still keeping it modernized. There are still some segments here and there with the music where it's more modernized. I mean, that's a given. But I loved how they kept that intact, and I thought that did the film all the more better for it because of that, because it just kept the spirit of this franchise alive. And like I said, every time when those scenes would pop up with that upbeat music, and again, not the Beverly Hills theme song itself, but like everything else that was attached to it, it kind of made me feel like I was watching an 80s movie, even though it's a more modernized sequel. And that I really did appreciate about that. That was something I actually wasn't expecting. And again, as far as nostalgia goes, that really kept it alive for me, and it was in a very awesome way, let me tell you. Now, the only mix I have is my own little personal thing, going back to what I said about the first film. How I felt like it was a little sluggish, it was a little slow. Here you kind of get the same thing. This is going to be a little difficult, especially when I do my ranking of all 4 of these. But I still think that this one is a little bit of the better out of the 2 of the first and this. And I'm not just saying that, like I said about the Bad Boys Ride or Die. I'm not just saying that just because it's the newest one. I'm not trying to be biased that way, but because the story was the way it is, and this is the best way I can explain it, and if this doesn't make sense, I apologize, but because the story was the way it was, and they threw in a different direction, and just the fact that Axel Foley has a daughter, and there's like higher stakes, and plus the gang is all back, and Ashton and Reinhold, they bring everything back to basics. I think that's why this one triumphs over that first one just a little bit. I mean, there's action here and there, but it felt about the same as the first one. But again, if my explanation doesn't come across as like making any sense, I really do apologize for that, but I've explained it as best I can, and that's what I'm gonna have to stick with, because like the story was really good, and they always say that if you throw in enough action, it's got to fit the story, it's got to be good enough for the story. I think it does well here, but I just wish there was just a little bit more. But I'm not gonna harp on it as much as I did the first one. I think the reason why I did that is because it was just too much of a surprise, and I hadn't seen these movies years prior of me doing this film review series, so yeah, bear with me on that. Which is why I still think that this one's a little bit more of a redeemable one. And that might be just me coming off of that god-awful third one. I don't know. But, again, I have my reasons, and I just hope that clarifies it enough for you. That, like, the story and just the dynamic between the father and daughter relationship and the gang being back, that's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it.
I have spoken!
And going back to the nostalgia point of view, because the second one was my most favorite, I can say this, but it just felt so much like that one in like a sort of a different way. Because even though Judge Reinhold's character wasn't in it as much, still, they do team up, and it felt right. There's no other way I can say it. It just felt right. But again, I'm not saying this just because this is the newest one, but I think that this one is the best yet. And again, doing my ranking video, this is going to be a little bit hard to do, especially comparing this one to the first. But for now, I think this one's about on par with that one, but just maybe a hair better. Just a hair better. Maybe two. But we needed this. We definitely needed this, especially coming off that third film. We definitely needed this to happen. It is the better film out of those two at least, and I would definitely recommend it. So if you have Netflix, it's on right now. Go check it out. It just got back on track exactly where it needed to be, and I'm all the more grateful for it. If you're hoping for a better sequel, you've come to the right place. This was the perfect way to redeem this franchise. It was a true happy accident. Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. What was your thoughts on it? Have you seen it yet? I know it just got released. You may need some more time to try to watch it. But what was your thoughts on this? Are you somebody that was relieved after watching this? Are you somebody that regained faith in this film after that third film? Or are you somebody who was traumatized so much by that last one that you just gave up? Is that how much of a stain the third film left on you? Leave me your comment down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share it. And always make sure to click that bell icon so you don't miss a thing. And I will see you on the next one. And again, have a happy 4th of July. Peace.